Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Southeast Media Sunrise, dedicated to giving a voice to authors of all genres. I'm your host, Jodi Hockinson. Joining us remotely by phone today is Justin Pogue, author of Rental Secrets, Reduce Your Rent, Get Better Values, Create Quality Communities. Justin Pogue is a real estate consultant and author based in San Jose, California. His services are sought after by property management companies, investors, and real estate consulting companies alike. Fox News, the Mercury News, Realtor.com, and ApartmentTherapy.com have all featured his insights for the benefit of their audiences. He got his start in real estate by purchasing properties on the list of lands available in the state of Florida. Since 2003, he has developed and managed apartments, rental homes, and student housing across the United States. Justin holds a degree in economics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as an MBA from the Darden School at the University of Virginia. As a San Jose native, he has also attended Bellarmine College Preparatory and the Harker School. Welcome, Justin, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to be here.
Do people really have the ability to influence what they pay for rent?
They absolutely do. It's just the problem is nobody's actually told them that that's an option for them. So when you're going out to rent a property, a lot of it is how you present yourself. If you come prepared with the right documents and all of that, but you're also starting to build a relationship with the landlord. And as you move in the property and the landlord has experience with you, that relationship forms the foundation of your ability to negotiate with your landlord the rents that you're paying for a particular property. And most people think about, the concept of financial capital and spending money, but they don't think about the concept of social capital and the value of their relationships with the other people that they're dealing with. In this case, the landlord, being that person.
So what made you decide to write this book?
When I left graduate school, my original plan was to go into management consulting. And that was around the 2002 timeframe when one of the dot-com bubbles were bursting. And a lot of those consulting companies were trying to figure out what their new business plan was going to be. And they didn't really need new people to help them do that. And that was when I shifted into real estate. And since that time, I've been managing residential property in various parts of the country. And I've also had an opportunity to work for property management companies and also hire property management companies. So I've seen this rental situation from a lot of different perspectives. And most recently, I had a position managing 200 apartments in the epicenter of expensive rentals in San Jose, California. So this national conversation that we're having about the housing crisis and the cost of housing, it's a really great conversation to have. But one of the things that I think is missing is most renters don't understand how the landlords are thinking, what their problems are, what their issues are, and how they think about their renters and renting to people. And part of the reason for writing this book is to really arm people who are out there in the rental market with the language and concepts that landlords are using and thinking about so that they're in a better position to negotiate. And then hopefully we as a country are in a better position to have that housing discussion on a national level.
Why did you choose the title Rental Secrets?
Because the information that I've put together in this book is information that most people wouldn't know if they didn't work in the residential property management industry.
And I'm thinking there's certainly things that the landlord doesn't want them to know. The landlord doesn't want them to know how their minds tick, right?
Well, the landlords, it's interesting. So real estate is a very fragmented industry, meaning that there's a lot of different players, and there's not a small number of players who dominate the industry. So that means that you have a lot of landlords who may own, a small number of units, have not necessarily have, they don't have decades of experience in this, in renting property. What typically happens is people go to these real estate seminars whichever guru you care to discuss. And in the seminar, the praises of real estate are sung, and all of what they're sharing is true. But unfortunately, what they're leaving out is once you own the property, you are responsible for all of the issues that come up related to that property. So you're facing marketing issues, customer relationship issues, legal issues, sometimes maintenance, construction, environmental issues, and all of these things are going around the property. And the people running the seminar assume you'll just have people to help you deal with that. Well, maybe you will, and maybe you won't. But the idea is that if landlords start thinking about their renters as more than just a check, there's some help that these residents can provide to help the landlord run the property more smoothly and make sure that things continue to happen, because the value of the property comes not just from the amount of the rent that people pay, but it's also the continuity and maintenance of that cash flow. And that's really where the value of the property comes from. So on the surface, it may seem like landlords don't want people to know these secrets, but it's really in the landlord's best interest for their residents to think about the property a little bit more like they would think about the property. And that will help everybody on both sides of the equation going forward.
So that's interesting. You're not telling prospective renters to be selfish by thinking how the landlord thinks. You're telling them to put themselves in the landlord's shoes.
It's much easier to negotiate with someone when you're able to speak their language and understand the issues that they're facing. And that's really what I'm providing to the renter, so that you're able to speak the landlord's language, you're able to understand what problems the landlord's facing, and then you can understand where you might be able to help, and then how that help can lead to compensation in the form of lower rent to some degree, and create that win-win for both parties involved.
Where does the power to influence your rent come from?
It comes from where the value of the property comes from. So there's three basic appraisal methods for property. One is sales comparables around the property, what similar properties have sold for. Two is what it actually costs to construct that building. But the third method is an income method. So at the end of the day, how much profit does this building create? And then that number is used to create a value for the property. Well, the benefit of what I'm talking about is that income method is based off of the profitability. And one of the biggest hits to profitability that landlords face is high turnover of units and vacancy. So when a property is vacant, not only is the landlord not getting any money from that particular unit, it's money that they've lost that they can never get back. It's not like a car where if I don't sell it today, I can sell it tomorrow. I can't sell you use of an apartment from yesterday. Yesterday is gone. So in reducing the cost of turnover by teaching residents to negotiate at either renewal time and so forth, helps keep the continuity of that cash flow going, helps the landlord to avoid that vacancy cost, and ultimately they end up with higher profit on that property than they otherwise would.
So the powers to influence your rent, are they affected by geography or location?
Great question, and it's a question that I get a lot. The strategies in the book are market-based strategies. So every landlord in every market, to some degree or another, is influenced by these factors that I point out in the book. So it's not just this book was written for San Francisco or this book was written for New York. These are issues that landlords face regardless of the market that they're in. And there are ways that renters can, or strategies that renters can use to negotiate with landlords regardless of the market that they're in. Now, some strategies will work better in certain markets than others, but they're all applicable because I really focused on what is the landlord's predicament? What is the landlord's, what are the problems inherent in being a landlord? And then what are the solutions or what is the potential assistance that renters could offer in order to, while they're negotiating for a better deal to make their situation better.
So let's talk a little bit more about vacancy and how it affects landlords. What does it really mean to the landlord?
When you're renting a property, if you've been there for a year, you'll likely receive a renewal notice saying, well, we'd like to increase your rent X dollars a month, and if you agree to stay. So most residents look at that as I have the option to stay or I have the option to leave. What I'm pointing out in the book is there's this middle section where you can actually negotiate. So what's happening is if that resident chooses to leave, the apartment will then become vacant. And pretty much in your best case scenario, that apartment will be vacant for about a month, because they may have a new tenant that comes in and signs a lease. But as a landlord, you don't actually start receiving money that you can put in your pocket and use to pay your bills until that person physically moves in and takes possession of the space. Well, there's a whole process to that. They've got to pack up the place that they're in now. They've got to get friends to help them move. They've got to take time off of work. They've got to rent a truck. So while this whole process is going on, you as a landlord are not collecting a dime that you can put in your pocket and start paying your bills with. So you're going to have this month of lost rent. On top of that, there's likely going to be issues in the unit that need to be fixed. So you'll have to pay someone to come in and paint. Someone will have to come in and shampoo the carpets. There may be repairs and other maintenance things that need to be done. You'll likely want to spruce up the yard so it shows well. Those kinds of issues. So in just to take San Jose as an example, that lost rent may be anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000, plus whatever you're spending to prepare the unit again for the next renter. So that may add another $1,000 on top of that. So you're looking at a $3,000 to $4,000 cost that you as a landlord are not really in charge of whether you have to pay or not. It's the resident who chooses to move out. They're the ones who are in charge of whether you have to pay that expense or not. So knowing that as a resident, we can then discuss, well, I know you're going to incur this $3,000 to $4,000 cost if I choose to leave. Well, let's negotiate this rental increase for me to stay, so that way you avoid this expense that I'm in charge of whether you have to pay or not.
So can you give us a couple of tips? How can people maximize their power of negotiation?
Maximizing your power of negotiation really first starts with maintaining a quality relationship with the people who are living in the apartment community around you, as well as the landlord or property manager. And I use this as an example to crystallize people's thinking. So if someone lives in an apartment community and they happen to have a pet, let's say they have a dog, when they walk their dog, if they don't clean up after their dog, they're creating negative social capital with their neighbors, and by extension with their landlord. So then when it comes time to renew, the landlord's not going to be as inclined to negotiate with them. They may not even be inclined to keep them as a resident because they've built up that negative social capital. Whereas if you flip that around and you've created positive relationships with your neighbors and your landlord, you've created a platform from which you can have that negotiation discussion. So you've set yourself up to be credible, and for them to have a reason to listen to you. The next thing is, in terms of enhancing that negotiation power, is understanding the costs that a landlord may face when you move out, or should you choose to move out. And that is one lever that you can use to negotiate. Another lever is there may be competing communities. And if you've lived anywhere near any large city, you've seen those people on the corner who are waving signs that say now leasing or lease now, or there's some offer that apartment communities make. The reason why they're doing that, and that is a really expensive way to advertise, by the way, but the reason why they're doing that is because there is fierce competition for quality residents. People who pay their rent on time, people who have the income to afford the unit that they're living in, people who follow the apartment rules and all of that and get along well with others. There is fierce competition for those people, because as we kind of discussed, that's where the value of the real estate comes from. So when we get down to the negotiating table, being aware of what the other competitor communities are doing around you and what your other options are, because your competitive position, your negotiation position becomes much stronger if you can say, well, I know you want to raise my rent $250 a month, but I have an opportunity at this other community to rent for about what I'm paying now. So, and yes, the community I'm in now might be a little nicer or what have you, but this is what the marketplace is giving me. So I have other options. So now we need to discuss, where we're going to meet as far as this renewal price that you've given me.
A lot of us have heard the expression, our rents are competitive with the market. What would you say is the real meaning of that expression?
Yes, they use it all the time. And what they mean by that is they will take like picture a map. And on the map, you'll see a dot, which is the community in question. Then they will draw a circle around that community with a radius of about a mile to a mile and a half. And they're looking for similar properties within that mile and a half. That's who they consider to be their competitors. And that's where they're getting those numbers from. But the problem with that is that's based on their location. And they use that because they can't change the location. The building is where it is. But from the renter's perspective, this property is half hour, 40 minutes from where I work. Okay, let's say it's 40 minutes east. Well, there may be communities that I would consider living in that are 40 minutes west of my job.
Mm-hmm.
Those communities are not within that mile and a half radius that apartment building is looking at. So I would submit that apartment building's competition is anywhere that their residents would choose to live, that their residents would consider to be comparable to where they're living now. So the competitive landscape is wider than they think it is, especially with the fact that people's commute times are starting to get longer because they're making different trade-offs between cost of living and where their job is and where their kids' daycare is and all of that. So the actual commute time has increased. So that radius that they need to be looking at is much larger than most landlords are making it.
Well, it looks like that's all the time we have for today. Anyone interested in purchasing this book can log into semediapro.com. This book is also available at rentalsecrets.net, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Smashwords. That was Justin Pogue, author of Rental Secrets, Reduce Your Rent, Get Better Values, Create Quality Communities. Thanks again for joining us today, Justin.
Oh, thank you. I had a great time.
Me too. And listeners, if you're interested in getting your book published, please visit us at semediapro.com and click on the book publishing link. This is Jodi Hockinson, host of Southeast Media Sunrise, Southeast Media Productions. Like us on Facebook at Southeast Media Productions or visit our website at semediapro.com.